And we are live here in the Storycraft Cafe. I am your host, Hank Garner. As always, today I am super excited, as I say all the time, to have with me Terry Hayes. Terry has a brand new book. It's called The Year of the Locust. And you might also know Terry from his previous novel, I Am Pilgrim. Lots and lots of people know you, Terry, from that book. And then you probably are very familiar with Terry's work as he has written for the screen on quite a number of occasions, and probably a movie or so that you have checked out in the past. Terry, such a great pleasure for me to have you on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Hank. It's a great pleasure to be here and to have a look at the cover of the American edition of Locust, which I've only seen photographs of. I haven't actually seen the book. So, no,
Oh,
thank you for having me here.
that's funny. I'm always kind of blown away at the different takes that different cover designers in different parts of the world take on the same story. It's always fascinating to, kind of see it through the lens of a different artist, I guess.
Yeah. And that particular cover is very interesting to me, as was the English edition, because you can see my name. Not that I'm vain or anything, but my name is on the cover. When they published I Am Pilgrim in England, and that was the first territory it was ever published in, my name wasn't on the cover. The publisher, who
What?
I love dearly, called me and he said, look, we've got a design issue here. We're going to use a fingerprint and it's going to be pretty impactful. And it's going to say, I am Pilgrim. I said, oh, yeah, well, that's sort of sensible because that's the name. He said, yeah,
Right.
but it's not going to look any good if your name's on the cover. It's going to crowd it all in. He said, what do you think? I said, well, nobody knows who I am as a novelist. They might know me as a screenwriter or a film producer or something. I don't know. Maybe they probably don't. Most people don't pay any attention to the credits except the names of movie stars. And that I said, go for it. If it's going to help display the book, he said, well, it's going to give it more presence on the racks in various bookstores because the title is going to be bigger. Otherwise, we're going to have to make the title smaller to accommodate your name. Thank God I didn't have one of those names that's got 250 characters in it or something, or letters in it, because you'd never read anything. But I thought, well, it's not that long a name. They can't even just sort of get it in a little bit at the bottom. And he said, no, no. He said, it's going to be much more impactful like this. So I said, fine, go for it. So in all the early editions of I Am Pilgrim in the UK, every market except the US, in every English-speaking market except the US, it's sort of written by nobody. You have to open the book to find who wrote it. I am pleased to say on Locust that the edition that was published in England had my name somewhat similar in size to the one that is on the shelf behind you. So if I needed evidence that I'd done something right in my life, that is it. That I went from nobody to somebody within the space of 2 books. So thank you, everybody.
That's
Thank
that's
you to
so
the
funny.
thank you to the publishers. When I was writing movies, my
I love
kids,
it.
Blockbuster was in existence then, and my kids, who are frankly not particularly nice people, I had 4 of them, and you'd think one would have turned out okay, but not necessarily. And that they would go down to Blockbuster.
Yeah.
They'd go down the aisles, and it'd be crowded. It'd be like Friday night or Saturday night. We'd be looking for weird movies that I hadn't seen, or I thought that the kids might learn something from. And these little cretins would go down the aisles and they'd start yelling out, hey, Dad, here's one of yours. Isn't it good? Of course, everybody in the store, this is in Australia, which is not common to write. I mean, in Hollywood, yeah, fine,
Yeah.
in LA, but in Australia, in the little backwater where we lived. This was fairly uncommon. So people would all be craning around the aisles. Well, who is this? Who is this guy? Trying to see the names of these movies. So it was very common in that regard. But it never happened with the book because my name wasn't on it. So it brought me some degree of pleasure that we didn't have to go to the bookstore and have these children yelling out, "Hey, Dad, here's your book, here's your book." It would have meant nothing to anybody. But now with
Would
Locust, it's been put right.
was your name at least on the spine of I Am Pilgrim?
Hank, I am just trying to remember that. And I don't have a copy of it here, so I can't duck over to another room and grab it. I cannot remember that.
That's a
My memory is that it wasn't because
wow.
I Am Pilgrim. They wanted it in large type. Now later on, after it
Sure.
found some degree of success, they reprinted
Yeah.
it, and and I'd done a lot of interviews, and everybody in Amazon had said that I was a moron. The normal thing for writers. So I was well known, at least within that small community, of the book buying
Sure.
public, and that. So they used my name. The original version, of which I have a number of copies, to my mind, is very valuable.
Well,
It is a testament to what publishers will do. God bless them.
but
Emily
it's in
Hessler, the publisher in America, she called me and she said, "They haven't put your name on it." I said, "No." She said, "Well, we will." I loved her after that.
well that brings up that you just talking about that kind of got the wheels turning for me. In the writing business, in the book publishing business, and I guess we're specifically talking about publishing now because sometimes that's a very different thing than the writing end. The publishing
Yes.
business and the writing are, sometimes are very 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 different animals.
Mhm.
Um, but in publishing, authors tend to gain a following.
Yeah.
You can name any number of authors, and people will buy their next book
Yeah.
just because of the trust that that author has earned for them.
Mhm.
And the story may not be good, but they're going to buy it anyway because
Yeah.
they've developed a relationship of sorts. Now, in the movie world, I would dare say that the vast majority uh, of movie watchers have no idea who wrote the script. They might follow some producers. A good bit of people will probably follow directors, and then
Mhm.
everyone follows the actors. And well, if
Yeah.
this is a Tom Hanks movie, I trust
Yeah.
Tom Hanks is going to bring a decent story.
Yeah.
Well, Tom
Yeah.
Hanks is only portraying the role that someone wrote for him.
Mhm.
Are you ever baffled by the difference in these two forms of expression and the way that people will trust a book author in different ways than they will a screenwriter?
Yeah, I used to be baffled by it, but having worked in the movies for so long, I'm not baffled by it. Primarily because there is generally no one author of a screenplay. That's very rare now. I mean, Oppenheimer is a rare beast. Chris Nolan wrote and directed it, and that now Oliver Stone used to do the same. And there's a
Right.
number of directors working in that regard. But if you're dealing with a director who is more employed to shoot the script, the studios have the idea things will be vastly improved by having 4, 6, 8, 10 people work on it. Because don't forget, Hank, that whoever gets credits is just the tip of the iceberg. I've written tons of movies and written some great scenes for movies that I've never been credited on. So there's always this host of people. So it'd be sort of like, oh, well, here's a new book by James Patterson and 9 other people. And you've got to remember all of these 10 people's names. Well, you get an idea pretty soon that this is not one person's vision of the story. This is a commercial enterprise. I did a version of Planet of the Apes long before the remake was made. Oliver Stone was going to produce and direct it. And I wrote what was a pretty interesting script. It probably wasn't perfect, but it had elements to it that were very good. And I must say that I think the version that was eventually made decades later, I think it was a very good film. So I don't have a dog in this fight. So I'm out at Fox having a meeting with Ollie and a group of other people. And, as usual, the studio's there with, vice president or the president of the studio, whoever was there, and 4 or 5 spear carriers from the studio. They're just to make up the numbers and nod their heads at whatever the boss said. So anyway, we're talking about this and about the screenplay. It's a complex story. Oliver seemed to be well disposed to it. All that. So the studio executive says, well, you know what this script really needs? Oh, that's interesting. I've given this some thought, but I'll be very interested in this. And he says, what it really needs is a baseball match, baseball game. I said, oh, gee, that had never occurred to me. And I said, why will the apes be playing baseball with the version of the astronaut? We said, I don't know. That's your job. I said, but there's sort of like, I can't think of a reason why somebody would suddenly stand up and say, hey, let's have a game of baseball. Let's stop trying to kill each other or take each other prisoner or torture us or do any things. Let's have a baseball game. He said, well, that's what it needs. It needs that sense of fun. I said, oh, okay. I'm making a note, sense of fun. I think this is crazy. And I said, well, I know the guy's name. I don't want to use it now. He's no longer there. But anyway, I said, I can't quite see how it's going to fit into the narrative as much as we might need a sense of fun. He said, oh, yeah. And I said, I don't know much about baseball. I'm Australian. I know a lot about cricket, but baseball is not part of our country. And he said, oh, yeah, not part of your culture. I said, no, it's not. He said, well, I think that's probably where we face the problem. I thought, oh, I've got it. My days are numbered. Not because the script's crap, or not because of any other definable reason, but because I don't have a sense of fun. I don't know anything about baseball, and I'm Australian. So, well, we went through the motions for another few months, and then, he got fired, and well, he was involved in a tragic car accident, and the project went nowhere. But then many years later, it was resurrected. And God bless the people involved because it did a very, very good job.
Yeah.
What I'm getting at is that had that movie been made, I might have done a lot of the work. And somebody else would come in and write the baseball section. Then somebody else would come in and jazz up the dialogue. And then somebody else would come in and say, well, it doesn't make any sense in the third act. And then somebody else would come in and say, well, what we really need is an incredible explosion at the end. And the studio would say, incredible explosion. Well, we had an incredible explosion in a movie 4 weeks ago, and that really did big business. So incredible explosions are good. We'll go with the incredible explosion. So the public are not in all cases. I mean, Oppenheimer's a fine case of somebody's vision, and to be honest, so is Barbie. But the public generally is not watching somebody's vision of something. They're watching a commercial project, a product. Now, you don't go down the supermarket shelves and say, well, I wonder who created these Kellogg's cornflakes, and look on the back for the credits. There's It's wrapped on the shelf. Buy it if you like it. Now, you know, there are, of course, exceptions, and there's some great directors work, and of course, many good writers. But at the end of the day, movies are a director's medium. Somebody has to lead the mob. Somebody has to be in charge of the production. Somebody has to make all the decisions that compound into being that creative vision. And that's the director. It's not the writer. And I was fortunate early in my career. I worked with some incredibly talented directors. And because I would work as a producer or co-producer, I had a right to be on the set. And, you know, I think I'm a reasonably civilized person. I wouldn't interfere unless I thought something was disastrously wrong, and it never was, because you hire good directors, good cinematographers, great production designers, all of that. So I always felt that I had an involvement, and I worked with very talented people. But I was under no illusions. It was not my medium. I was not the director. You hire the best director you can, and you go with him or her, and that's what I did. But I was never surprised that people would not recognize me when I paid my credit card. If I told them what I did, or they found out, or one of my damn kids let them know, then
in the
you
blockbuster.
know, yeah, or at school. Oh, Mom
Right.
wrote maths, you know, and all the kids would, even many years later, will watch it because, you know, they're good movies. And so people would talk to me about it, but they wouldn't recognize me. Whereas, of course, with the novel, people know your name and they know who you are and what you do. And, you know, they have a closer affection because they know that one person created this and there's nobody else.
Right.
There's no director, there's no producer, there's no cinematographer, there's no music composer. It's you and you alone. So,
Right.
you know, you're in the playoff at Augusta in the Masters. It's just you and that damn ball. Or you're, you know, playing singles, you know, at the US Open.
Yeah.
And that, so it's a very different medium, and you know, directors can become real stars. Steven Spielberg, you know,
Sure.
Chris Nolan, lots of them, but never the writers.
Well, over the years, Terry, of podcasting about books and authors, I've gotten to know quite a few frustrated actors that have turned novelist, and I'm always fascinated by the journey of some of these people that they've been involved in storytelling, in acting, either on the stage or on television or movies or whatever, and it's very much a collaborative process, like you described. There's so many people involved
Yeah.
in bringing the story to the screen, and then you have this particular actor and all of their co-stars and the director, and it's very much a collaborative process. Everyone
Yeah.
is involved and has a uh, has a job in telling the story. Well, I think a lot of there have been a lot of frustrated people in that process that turn
Mm-hmm.
to novel writing because they are in control of it all, like you
Yeah.
described. Um,
Yeah.
do you? I guess what I want to know is, as being someone that has written for the screen and knowing that it's going to be a collaborative process, do you approach novel writing differently than you would approach script writing? And from the beginning, when you're writing a script, you're not anticipating there being 100 people involved in telling the story. You're trying to tell the story in the beginning. Um,
Yeah.
Aside from the medium being different, whereas screenwriting is a lot of dialogue, where novel writing you have to write dialogue, but then you have to also bring in all the backstory, and you have to do all the setting, and there's a
Yeah.
lot more that has to be written. How do you approach these two different mediums?
Yeah, well, at its core, it's the same thing, really, Hank. It's just telling a story. It
Yeah,
is. Now, I too know a lot of actors, many, many actors, and
I'm
now
sure you do.
we're now going to get into real trouble. Okay. Now, you probably don't like trouble. I don't mind. I
I don't
live
mind a
in
bit of trouble.
good, good. And get into a lot of trouble because if the actors who are watching this are about to hit the roof, because the truth is this: acting is not creative. It's not. They can tell themselves it is. They can tell them they are a creative individual and that they can write a novel or direct a movie or write a symphony or do, paint better than Picasso, whatever they want to do. Acting is interpretive. It is. The Beethoven was created. The first violin or the conductor of the London Symphony playing, one of the great Beethoven pieces is not creative. He's interpretive.
Sure,
And
sure.
that is a very important thing. And it brings an enormous amount of value to Beethoven's work. But there's a vast difference between being poor old Ludwig sitting down looking at a blank page and reading the notes that he wrote. Now,
Right.
I read an interesting thing the other day about music, and I think it's very, very true. You don't have to be able to write music to be a great composer. You have to be able to hear the music. You have to be able to hear it in your head.
Right.
And the rest of it is just jotting it down so other people can eventually hear it. What actors do is highly skilled, very imaginative, and you hope to God you work with great actors. But they have something on the page, just like the lead violin at the London Symphony has something on the page. Now, he might decide that he's going to do it differently or interpret it differently. Thank God. So they
Right.
should. But an actor has that same thing. When I sit down, me and millions of others, I am facing that same problem. It's an empty page. I'm not interpreting anything. I'm making this crap up as I go on. So
Right.
the blank page is never any different. I don't care if you're writing a symphony or you're writing an epic novel or you're writing a screenplay or you're writing a note to your mom. The blank page is there. And now you're going to have to do something about it. So, at that level, it's very challenging. It's very confronting. What's the first line you put down? What's the first line you put down on a screenplay? In Pilgrim, it's there are places I'll remember all my life. Okay, it's okay, but it's better than okay because I didn't
Yeah.
write it. The Beatles wrote it. Lennon and McCartney wrote it, and Picasso says, good artists borrow, great artists steal. Now,
Right.
I, I don't know if I'm a great artist, but by God, I'm willing to steal from anything. The last line in Pilgrim is, He is risen. He is risen. It's the Bible. It's a resurrection story. Pilgrim
Right.
is about the resurrection of a man, really, who had left the secret world, was brought back into it, and went on this great adventure and managed to survive. The first line of Locust is, I once went to kill a man. And I thought, that's okay. That tells you it's not, going to be some nice little story set in English village. The last line is, riders on the storm. That's all we are and can never hope to be, riders on the storm. That's from the Doors. Jim Morrison was a damn good poet, died too young,
Right.
but a great poet. So I've got to find something that starts me off and that page is no longer empty. Now, movie, you're trying to grab, or a screenplay, you're trying to grab attention straight off. So what do? I know what most Hollywood writers do. They say the explosion took out 47 skyscrapers, killed 7 million people. And that was just the first one. Next. And everybody's supposed to say, oh, Jesus, God, this is like,
Yeah.
okay. So you've got to find a way into it. I
Sure.
find it with novels, the way into it is through poetry, not not sort of very classic. I like Coleridge, and I like a lot of the great poets, but the poets that work today are the troubadours. It's Dylan and Leonard Cohen and Bruce Springsteen and
Right.
these are the poets of our era, of our generation. They've set it to music. So I always try to think, okay, what's the story about? What's the story about? Now find something evocative. Find something that promises to take you into an experience. Now, I have a line for a novel. I don't know what the novel's about, but it was close to nightfall when we fell down out of the mountains, 30 of us on horseback. That was when we saw them. I don't know who's on horseback. I don't know who they saw. I don't know where the mountains are. I don't know what the hell anybody's doing. But I know that if you wrote that line in a screenplay or in a novel, you're going to get somebody to ask the same questions you're asking.
Right.
And they might read the next paragraph. So it's very similar. Of course, on a screenplay, you can get frustrated, open the door, walk into the office next door and say to the director, what do you think? And he'll say to you, he'll read the 5 or 6, 7 pages and he'll say, well, that's crap. Or he'll say, well, I think it's got potential. Or he'll say, you're a genius. Let's go and have lunch. And I've had very few lunches with directors. It's generally back to the word processor. But you have that sounding board. Good director, and I've worked with some really, really great directors, really, really fine, creative minds and artists, and you have that. You're both trying to do the same thing. You're trying to make a great movie and not sell yourself out. You're trying to make a great movie and not relying on having some ridiculous sex scene because, well, that might work. No, you're trying to stay true to yourself and whatever vision you have of the story, and you're trying to craft it up. And then you got to deal with the actors, some of whom, have a different agenda to you. And that when you're writing the novel, no, it's just you, dig and ditch, day after day, a bit more ditch. Hope that you're heading in the right direction. You dig 4 miles of ditch and then realize,
Right.
oh, I shouldn't have gone that way. Oh, I should have turned left.
Should have taken a right turn at Albuquerque or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I'm so glad that you mentioned the opening and ending lines of The Year of the Locust, because I was flipping through earlier today thinking about things that I would like to bring up, and the opening and the closing are so evocative
I think,
that I wanted to ask you. I'm the kind of writer that when I begin, I need to know where the story begins, and I need to know where I'm going.
yeah,
Um, some things in the middle are kind of wishy-washy. I know I'm driving from Los Angeles to New York. I know that for a
Yes,
fact. Now,
yes,
whether I drive along the south and then get
yeah,
as far east as I can go and then turn,
yeah,
north, or if I want to cut across Route 66, or
yeah,
however, it's all up. Anything is possible, but I know I'm going to begin here and I know I'm going to end
yeah,
here.
yeah,
Are
yeah,
you the kind of writer, and I wanted to read just this opening. I once went to kill a man. At other times in younger days I had followed my work through the neon lit alleys of Tokyo, watching the sunrise over the mosque of the nine cupolas, and waited on the waterfront in old Istanbul as a woman's tears fell like rain.
yeah,
I'm in. I need who's saying this, and where am I about to follow them? But I'm in.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
do you kind of lay out that opening paragraph, and is it solid, and then the story goes from there? Or some people will, after they've written the first draft, kind of reflect on that and then craft an entryway for the reader, depending
Yeah,
on what they've crafted.
yeah.
I like to set the mood and then let that dictate the rest of the story. Which kind of writer are you?
Yeah, I have to get the first paragraph right in my own mind, and it has to be evocative.
Yeah.
And so, and a woman's tears fell like rain. Well, somebody else's tears fell like rain. That was Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner. And
Right.
just when he was going to die, brilliant piece of writing, brilliant, brilliant soliloquy from Rutger, written by David Webb Peoples, who I had the great pleasure and honour to know briefly when he was down in Australia making a movie. He wrote Unforgiven, a truly wonderful screenplay, a great piece of storytelling, and he wrote these lines for Rutger Hauer in Blade Runner, and Rutger refashioned them and talked to David about it. They cut it down, they made it more evocative. I'd love to quote those lines, but I will misquote them, so I'd rather not. But he was standing on the shoulder of Orion, watching, I think, the Imperial Staff Fleet fly by or something like that. It's wonderful. What I do is I sit there and I think about my story, and unlike you, I know where I'm going, sort of. You headed from Los Angeles to New York. I generally end up in Peru on my way to New
Right.
York. I think, why are they talking like this? What is wrong? They're speaking Spanish, but nobody seems to speak English much.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure.
That's a
Where's
serious
the
right turn in Albuquerque.
Yeah, I mean, it was so. So I know the broad sweep up, but I've got some scenes or chapters that I know are going to be pretty good. But then I have to find that thing that encapsulates something of the story. So with that opening paragraph, I it's a man reflecting on his life. He's telling us a story that he once went to kill a man. Well, he's clearly not, going to be elected Pope anytime soon.
Right.
He's had many adventures in strange places. The mosque, the nine cupolas or cupolas, I don't even know how to pronounce that word, but anyway,
Me
that
either.
mosque is the oldest mosque in Afghanistan. It's a very
Okay.
mystical place. Now, the woman standing on the waterfront in old Istanbul, these are things that he's noticed or have affected him or have registered with him on the way through his life. So it tells you he's a killer. He has had a very adventurous life in some most unusual places. And now he's reflecting on it. And he's not reflecting on it from a sense of glory or vanity of, hey, look at what I did. I saved the world. Hey, look at all of this. I've led a vivid life. And aren't you envious? No. To me, there's a sense of him being saddened at some of the things he's had to go through. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when you come 270,000 words later to the end, and he says, riders on the storm, that's all we are and can never hope to be. You have a sense between those two paragraphs that, yeah, he did all those things. He went to extraordinary places. And there's no real explanation except that the universe will pick you up and toss you through the most turbulent things. And all you can do is survive. Now, that to me was always the story of a denied access area spy. The triumph is not in the mission, the triumph is in survival.
Well,
And
and
he did it.
that was one of my when I finished reading the book and I read that closing paragraph, I was thinking along those lines that you could take this paragraph and just tag it directly underneath the opening paragraph, and it's a complete thought. And the everything that happens in the book between those 2 points, I don't want to say it's irrelevant, but it's a whole story. Is my point? It's
Yeah.
almost like you were talking about the great troubadours a little while ago, and there are
Yes.
some of my favorite things to listen to, and I feel like we've kind of lost some of this in the modern era of music. Is when we used to produce albums, records, where you had an
Yeah.
A side and a B side, and a
Yeah.
popular thing, not done very often, but a popular vehicle was the song cycle album, where
Oh, yeah.
the songs tell a story, and from the first
Yes.
song, when you get to the 10th song, it's brought you back around, and then you could flip it
Yeah.
back over, start again with the first, and you're right back into the story, and it's a cycle progression. And this book feels like that in a way. It can relive over and over like that, and what's between those two paragraphs is a wonderful story. It's a great journey. It's exciting and heartbreaking and all of the things that you want it to be. But
Yeah.
you know, I'm grasping for words that I'm not grabbing. But I hope you're getting my
No,
my
no, no,
sentiment.
I understand completely because that was the thought process. That was the thought process. Set him up as being an intriguing person.
Right.
That's the that's the assertion that you're making to your readers. Okay, this guy has not lived a life like most of us have. Okay. I mean, there's very few people I know, thank goodness, that could say I once went to Kilimanjaro.
Right. Let's hope
Now
not.
I have to, yeah, well, let's hope. I, I now have to prove the thesis. I now have to take you on that very long and complex and hopefully exciting and thrilling adventures of him. It's not just one adventure because you fill in the backstory, you try to formulate how he gained this view of the world. And I have to prove to the reader that he has seen the the mosque. He has stood on the on the waterfront of Old Istanbul. He has walked down the neon lit alleys of Tokyo, and not one of them was easy. He wasn't a tourist. He was there for a reason. So I set it up. Now I've got hundreds of pages to prove to you. If I've done my job correctly, right at the end, the reader will say, yeah, you were right. What a life. What a vivid life. What an experience he's had. And I've shared with him. And he's right. That
Yeah.
the universe is not benign, but it's not evil. It's even worse than that. It doesn't care. Now, I'm not talking of God. That's a whole different concept. I'm talking
Yeah.
about black holes and the Milky Way and
Right.
stars and that. And you come out at the end and you say, I agree with him. I maybe you say this. I don't agree with him, not with Terry, but with Kane. I don't agree with him. I don't think the universe is uncaring, but I can understand he thinks that. I know where he's coming from. If I'd have had the experiences he's had, maybe I'd feel the same. So you feel not so much a sympathy for him, but an empathy. As an aside, Hank, that's what we've lost in political dialogue in
Right.
America and many other countries in the world. It's there's no desire to understand why people might feel the way they do. You know, we can see the tragedy that particularly interests me because I write spy thrillers, but you can see the tragedy unfolding in Gaza. Now, there's no attempt on either side to understand what the other side is thinking of. So it will never be, as it stands at the moment, it can't be resolved. It is just going to be a cycle of never ending violence. What I try to do, say, in Locust is to say, yeah, that's not my worldview. Let's say you're just some reader. It's not my worldview, but by God, I understand why it's his, why he would think that.
Right.
And he's been an interesting man. I've enjoyed the time I've spent with him. And I've learned a lot along the way. I've learned about denied access area spies. I've learned about Baku in Azerbaijan. I've learned about the Baikonur Cosmodrome and its great place in the evolution of humanity or of mankind. I've learned lots of stuff. And I've been in awful situations with him, and he's managed to survive. And maybe if I'd have gone through that, then if I'd walked a mile in his shoes, I might think the way he does. Now, if we take the America, I was a foreign correspondent, a political correspondent. I lived a long time in America. If we take the American political scene at the moment, if you're earning minimum wage and you have no health insurance and you have no certainty that your job's going to last beyond the next few weeks, you might have a different view of America to that which is held by a hedge fund manager who's pulling down 100 million a year. Now, they are going to be very, very different interpretations of American life. And that's the same in Australia. I live in Portugal at the moment, and that's very similar here. My wife and I, the kids, spent many, many years in Switzerland, and it's no different there. People's experiences determine how they view the world, and we seem to have lost the ability of many people to try to understand the reasons for those different approaches. Great thing in a novel, maybe I've done it in Locust, I have no idea. But the great thing in a novel is that I control it, that I take them on that journey and they can understand at the end what sort of man he is and why he
Well,
thinks the way he does.
to that point, I have watched a handful of movies that give you that sense at the end. I can think of a handful that you are just emotionally wrecked. And if you watch, for instance, Schindler's List, it's hard to watch a rom com right after that. You
Yeah.
just you're ruined for the
Oh,
for the night or whatever,
yeah.
and maybe the next day. There will come a
Yes.
point pretty quickly where you could be entertained by something else, and it's a definite emotional impact that this form of storytelling has, and it does make an impact on you to an extent. A novel like The Year of the Locust, when I finished that book, I was devastated, in the best possible way, and and I'm always have 3 or 4 books that I'm reading for show prep and my own reading for entertainment, which hopefully they overlap sometimes. Um, but I couldn't pick up another book for a week. I would pick something up and I was like, this is just it's just not doing it for me. There's a book hangover, I think some people call it, where you're
Right.
so invested in these characters and the events that happen that your brain just won't shut off. I'm
Yes.
I'm going on more adventures. I'm trying to dissect the things that you've told me and trying to figure out what happened and how could this have gone differently and should it have gone to, there's so many things just going on. Um
Yeah.
I would think that as an author, when someone tells you that they are completely wrecked at the end of your story, you've got to be like, yes, I
Oh,
succeeded.
fantastic. Yeah, yeah, it's the greatest feeling. It's the greatest feeling. I don't know if this happened to you, but it certainly did to me when I was, young and going to movies. I'd be so swept up into the story that, and we never stayed for the end credits or anything like that. That didn't
Right.
mean that. I didn't care who did visual effects. I was a kid. So you get up and you're in that darkened place, and they're starting to run the credits, or the end is just coming up. And you get up and you walk out, and you are so absolutely surprised, and in many cases relieved, that it's daylight outside. There are
Right.
cars
Right.
driving by, and the
Yeah.
Germans are not coming over the hill machine gunning you.
Right.
It's like
Exactly.
I just jumped tracks. I was in that reality so deep
Right.
that I walked outside and I am amazed to find this world out there. And if you can do that in a novel, it's very hard to do in a novel because, a movie has so many assets. The dialogue might be crap, but the music will tell you what's going on. I can sit down and watch, especially here in Portugal, movies with no dialogue. I turn all the subtitles off, mute the dialogue, and I know what's happening in the movie because the actors are telling me with their whatever they're doing. The music's telling me.
Right.
You don't have that in a novel.
True.
You were saying before, you're absolutely right. I have to set design the entire chapters. I don't have a
Mhm.
production designer who's won 4 Academy Awards. They're telling me, well, this is what you should do. I've got Dean Semler, who shot Road Warrior and Dead Calm and won the Oscar for Dances with Wolves. I've got him leaning over my shoulder. No, you've got to take the reader into this reality. Go, take them by the hand and walk with them for mile after mile after mile. And that expression, a book hangover, is a wonderful expression because that is exactly what it is when we read, not my books, but really, really good novels. And when we see good movies, I mean, Godfather 1 and Godfather 2 are brilliant movies. And for the length that they run, you have been, you know, sitting in that room with the Godfather. You've been sitting
Mhm.
there with his family and going through it all, and that sympathizing, empathizing, objecting, doing whatever. You come out, and suddenly you're not on the eastern seaboard of America or in Sicily or in Vegas. No, you're in downtown Sydney, and the traffic's honking and people are yelling at each other and somebody's saying, let's go to the beach. So it's a different reality. But if you can do that in a novel or a movie, as you say, that's the highest form of praise. When people
Yeah.
come out and say, "My God, you put me through the ringer." I don't know if you recall first time you ever saw the movie Alien with that chest buster scene.
Oh yeah.
Never, I never saw it. I had to go back and see the movie in order to see that scene because the music told me what was coming, but the camera movement told me something dreadful was going to happen. I didn't have
Right.
time to think, oh, yes, Terry, this is a visual analogy for cancer. Oh, I didn't think that. I was petrified. I had my head buried down between my knees, and that was that. I walked out and I thought, whoever made that movie, they really punished us. They
Yes.
really beat the living daylights out of us. And good luck to them. I stand in absolute admiration. It's a very difficult thing to do, and they did it. Well, I mean, Jim Cameron did it with Terminator. I mean, and any number of people have done it, but compared to the number of movies that have been made, it's a very small cohort.
Right.
It's hard, very hard to do in a novel because it's just you and the written word. I wish somebody would work out a way that as you're reading, music starts to play. That'd be very useful because music, of
Yes,
course,
it
is very
would.
evocative, and it would overcome a lot of my failures in crafting the words. But yeah, you're right. If you can get that feeling of having
Yeah.
wrecked somebody's afternoon, then you're doing a good job.
You've done a great job. Um, Terry, I'd like to talk for just a moment about inspiration.
Yes.
Because a lot has been made of the Year of the Locust, that it's coming out 10 years um, since your previous novel. And I don't want to um, belabor that point. The book comes when the book comes. Um, but I believe that I read somewhere that that when the COVID lockdowns happened and the world went into chaos, as we all remember just a couple of years ago, that something kicked this book into high gear for you, or that a particular kind of inspiration came. I don't know what it is, but that's what I want to ask you. What was it about that time and the circumstances around it? I believe I understand that you were separated from your family for quite a while. Um,
Yeah.
what was it about that time that now we have the Year of the Locust on our shelves?
Yeah, it was a difficult time. Everything after Pilgrim was a difficult time. I'm more than happy to talk about what took 10 years. Um, in fact, if you don't mind, I'll deal with that and
Sure,
then get on to my other problems.
sure.
Um, I'd been a migrant child. I'd gone to Australia when I was 5, and there were the four of us, mum, dad, myself, and my older brother. And we didn't know anybody in Australia. We'd gone on an Italian boat for 6 weeks down to the ends of the earth, and we were alone. There were no grandparents down there. There were no aunts, uncles. There was no going home to England. That was an impossibility. I came from very not poor, but very ordinary circumstance. There was no money. And so anyway, we arrived there and didn't know a living soul, and it was very difficult for a 5-year-old because it was vastly different to the life in a village in the south of England. And anyway, my mother never adapted and became a very troubled woman. And I was, at a very vulnerable age. And I took in storytelling. I read a lot. I read everything. I was, a voracious reader. And so pretty soon I got the smart idea that, well, it can't be that difficult to do it. Look at all the books in the library. There's hundreds of thousands of books. So I thought I'll be a writer. That's what I became. It was against that background. So anyway, 200 pages at Pilgrim. And I have no idea whether it's any good or not. But, I figure it's good enough to keep going. So I'm 200 pages in, too far in to abandon, not far enough to see the end. When my brother arrived at my house unannounced, this in Sydney, and told me he had cancer. And he was not an old man by any stretch of the imagination. And he told me what sort of cancer. And so I asked him what the doctors said, how long, and he said they could be 6 months to a year. Well, they were right, down the low end. So I lost my brother. About 4 or 5 months later, I had the duty, the obligation that I would not wish on any person on earth of standing in a corridor at a hospital in Sydney and discussing a situation with the doctors and giving my authority to turn the life support machine for my loved father. A number of months after that, oh, thank you. A number of months after that, my mum died. I think having lost one of her only 2 children and lost a husband, they'd been married for 65 years.
Wow.
I think it was just too much for her. And anyway, she passed away. And so within the space of a year, I lost my entire family. And they were the only people that knew of that childhood dream or had experienced that childhood dream. I mean, I talked to my kids about it, I talked to my wife about it, but they were there. And none of them lived to see the publication of the book. None of them ever got to say, well, guess what? You weren't full of crap. You really didn't do it. I'd always wanted to write a book that was well regarded, well received, and had sold around the world. I got it. But it was very lonely, very difficult. But I had to keep, through that year, I had to keep writing. I had no choice. I didn't have time to grieve. I had nothing except that page in front of me. And I kept going. I had my wife and my kids, of course, but I didn't have time to process a lot of things. I was too busy, too exhausted. Anyway, when Pilgrim got published, and there's always a period of time where you have no idea what's going on, and then started to be acknowledged as being a reasonable sort of piece of work, and it started to sell millions of copies around the world. I wasn't present for that. I wasn't emotionally present. I was processing a whole lot of other things, a real lot.
I can imagine.
The memories, the loss of your family. So I didn't feel too inclined to sit down and start another book. I was going to deal with that. And of course, my wife and I had 4 kids under the age of 6 at one stage. They're a little bit older when Pilgrim got published, but we'd had our children later in my life, and medical science had told us that she would never get pregnant without a course of hormonal treatment, all that. Well, we proved them wrong. Once she had one child, she virtually didn't stop being pregnant. So we had 4 of these kids, and who, of course, I loved dearly, more than life itself. And my own reflecting on my own childhood and the sense of that our time on earth is limited, and coming home in a very impactful way, I decided my children would have the best childhood I could ever give them. And that was nothing to do with money. Irrelevant. No, it's to, and look, every parent in the world knows this. It's to do with time. It's to do with devotion. It's to do with setting an example. So I never missed a cricket match. I never missed a cricket training session. I never missed a horse riding lesson. I never missed a drama production. I saw more productions of Aladdin than anybody should ever have to endure. I was there every sporting event, every cultural event. We took them to places around the world to try to show them what a wonderful planet this is. And it took time. It took time to heal. It took time to get myself into a position with the children where I felt that I was discharging my responsibilities properly. I had the unalloyed support of my wife. I was fortunate that we had financial resources, that I didn't have to pop a book out every 2 years. And I think, as everybody knows, you never get that time back with your kids. It's a once in a lifetime opportunity. You can say to yourself, "Oh, later on." Yeah, and then before you know it, they're teenagers, and the last thing they want to do is do anything with their parents. They cross the road if they see you coming.
Yeah.
It's them. I don't want my friends to meet them. And that
Harry Chapin taught us that lesson, didn't he?
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And it was an involved and difficult time. And then, of course, Locust was a mammoth task. Then things had stabilized at home, and myself, and I was in a good position. The boys thought it would be a good idea to go to school in England because they love cricket. I thought there were very many better cricketing opportunities in England. So I said, yeah, sure. Why not? I'm a gypsy at heart, just this person that rambles around the world and lived in so many different places, which I find fascinating. So we said, yeah. So I went to England to look for a house for the family to come and join us, to join me. And, so it was my wife, the 2 dogs, kids, some horses that had to go to Holland because my daughter paid attention during horse riding lessons, and she's training in the Netherlands to hopefully be a member of the Australian Olympic team. So we'll see. So, all that childhood stuff paid off to some extent. And anyway, so I'm in England, and, Pilgrim's all about recreation of viruses, and I know more than perhaps a lot of people about the science of viruses and how epidemics, how fast they spread and how dangerous they are. So, of course, knowing all of this, when I first, when COVID really started to become a real problem, I called my wife and said, don't worry, it's going to be all over in 3 months. So, take that for what it's worth, Hank. What do I know about viruses? Nothing. So anyway, she said, yeah, all right. And then, of course, it got worse and worse. And she was about to put the dogs on the plane in Australia to join me in England, and they were going to join. The dogs take longer to get to England than the family did. And so they were leaving 2 days ahead. I'm watching the news, and I called her. I said, don't put them on the plane. She said, why? I said, this is going to be really bad. This is going to be really, really bad. She said, oh. I said, I stay there. She said, what are you going to do? I said, well, I'm going to go to Portugal. She said, have you ever been to Portugal? I said, no. She said, well, what are you going to do in Portugal? I said, I'm going to look for an apartment in Lisbon. And the weather's good. Cost of living's reasonable. it's an interesting place. It was the spy center of the world for a period there between the wars. And I said, I'll go there and I'll sit this out and we'll see how it goes. I said, I'm frightened that this might get very bad. And I've got a lot of business interests. I'm not being able to leave Australia. I said, all right. I came to Portugal. I didn't know anybody in Portugal. I don't speak the language. Didn't know one soul. Didn't speak the language. Had never been here before in my life. But I found an apartment and I got Portuguese residence here within about 4 days.
Wow.
Then Australia, God bless them, closed the borders. My wife's closest friend is married to a very, very senior politician in Australia. So after a few weeks of closed borders, Kristen, my wife, rang him and said, listen, Terry's marooned in Portugal. He's not allowed back into Australia because the borders are closed and we can't leave. Now, we're not going to do any harm by leaving. We just want to go and join him. Okay? Our senior politician friend said, no way. No way. He said, those are the rules. He said, it's just impossible. Now, I admire Australia for that. I love Australia for that. Doesn't matter who you are or who you know. The rules are the rules. And
yeah, it's rare for a politician to not bend the rules occasionally. That's refreshing.
Yeah. So she was stuck there, and I was in Lisbon, and I had no furniture. We organised to get some furniture from a house we had in New Zealand packed up and put on a boat. So Hank, best-selling international author Terry, is living in an apartment, which you can see behind me, in Portugal, in Lisbon, in Portugal, unable to speak the language. When the city goes into complete lockdown and the only place you're allowed to go is the supermarket once a day, not no soul, with a blow-up mattress on the floor, a desk that he bought at IKEA 4 hours before it closed permanently at that stage, a desk chair, and a TV in Portuguese.
Wow.
That was my glamorous life. So my wife took pity on me and organised for this furniture to come, which was great. Except the boat, a very modern freighter, really modern, it wasn't some heap of crap, is sailing from New Zealand up to Europe. And it gets off the coast of Singapore in the Malacca Straits and catches on fire. How many freighters today catch on fire? They can lose your container overboard. They can do many things. They can hit a floating container. There's lots of disasters. Fire is not generally one of them in very modern freighters.
Right.
So we had no idea what had happened to our container of furniture. The boat's towed up to close to Kuala Lumpur where it has to be repaired. Finally, after quite some months, they tell us that our container has survived and they're going to put it on another boat and send it up to Rotterdam. But the problem is that COVID is now closing the entire world down in a really major way. It took a long time to get any furniture. I've never been so happy. I've never been so happy to see some furniture. I had a real bed to see. It was 2.5 years, Hank. I never saw the family for 2.5 years. They were down in Australia, which I was really happy about because Australia has a world-class medical system. Its health system is really outstanding. I knew if any of them got sick, that was their best chance. Down in Australia was their best chance. Portugal, unfortunately, does not have a similar healthcare system, especially if you don't speak the language, I'm sure. No, it's not up in the top, probably 100 or 50 in the world. Not at all. And my fear was that I would get the virus and get it very badly. and the family would not be able to see me should the worst happen. So I was very careful. I was really worried. I mean, it was very lonely, extremely difficult, and really quite frightening at times, because Portugal ended up with a very, very high fatality rate. The Australian government, our friend being part of it, did exactly the right thing. They closed it down and they saved countless thousands of lives. Australia had one of the lowest fatality rates from COVID. And that was because discipline of government, the cohesion of the society, and the commitment of Australians to save as many lives as possible. I do not object. I do not. I think they did a wonderful job. It was personally hard for me and the family, but hey, Hank, we lived, we survived. And I was trying to write COVID, sleeping on it. If I can give your audience one piece of advice,
Sure.
do not buy a mattress that you blow up by one of those electric pumps. Do not. Because as the night goes on, I don't care what they say, they are not telling the truth. As the night goes on, the air starts to seep out. I don't know where it comes from. I don't know what happens. They are the most uncomfortable things in the world. They really are. And it was just me sleeping on it. So that's my advice. People often say to me, what advice do you have about writing? My advice always is don't buy an air inflatable mattress. So that's the first thing. So it was very difficult circumstances. And my editor, both in America and in England, different editors, they both commented that you can see it in the text.
Yes.
And they said, you're going to have to tone it down. It's so miserable. It reflects your own, emotions and sensibility. So I did. I went back after COVID was over. I was reunited with the family. I have to tell you, Lisbon Airport's really very small. There were a fair few people there to meet incoming flights. They flew by Dubai. I'm out there 2.5 years. I missed them at the airport. I was there on time. They came through. I must have been looking in the other direction. And I thought after a while, I think that's the last of those passengers. Can't see anybody else. Their phones were not working because they were now in Lisbon and they had Australian cards in them. I jumped in a taxi and drove to the hotel where they were staying because the apartment couldn't accommodate all of us. I'm waiting outside. Where have you been? I said, I've been at the airport. So those people on Amazon and Goodreads who, take an enormous amount of delight in telling me how stupid I am, all I can say to them is this: you are right. My family agrees with you. I say, how could you miss us at the airport? 2.5 years, you moron. I did. Anyway, things got better, of course. The kids had changed a lot, I was overjoyed that I'd spent as much time with them as I had because I was separated from my wife. I'd say, it's really unfair. I said, no, it's not. It's not. Men go to war and they never come home.
Right.
My dad was 19, married for 2 days when he went to fight in Burma, which is near now. First time he ever saw a Japanese person was when they were trying to kill him. He'd never seen a Japanese person. No idea. He came from, little village in England. And I said to Chris, I said, no, it's that wonderful line, be thankful for what you got. not what you missed. You know, I'm
Right.
thankful for what we had.
Right.
We survived, and the kids all survived. And you know, you've got to. That's the important thing. So things got
Yeah.
better. I went back and read those pages I'd written during COVID. Realised, my God, it was, you know, I was a man on the verge of a nervous
Yeah.
breakdown, and
Why was I so
and
morose?
yes, exactly. I mean, you know, I'm
Yeah.
getting up every morning, and well, you'll remember what it's like. Most people, you know, who went through it remember that you've got a stuffy nose or a bit of a raspy throat, or you know,
There it
you've got
is. Yeah.
a slight fever, and you thought, this is it. Now, how bad's
Right.
it going to be? And this was before there were vaccines or anything like that. Of course, I'd written Pilgrim, and I knew the history of vaccines. I couldn't wait for a vaccine. I read all the stuff all around the world, of course, about people who are vaccine skeptics. And I remember saying to Kristen, my wife, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll tell you what we'll do. Tell you what we'll do. We'll introduce smallpox, hemorrhagic smallpox. It's got a 100% strike rate. You don't survive it. Nobody survives it. I said, let's introduce that into the world, and let's see who wants the vaccine and who doesn't, because your only hope of survival
Right.
against something like that, your only hope is vaccines.
Mm.
And, you know, smallpox was eradicated from the world. And one of the great triumphs of medical science. So I had no problem. I own a lot of the history of vaccines. So there were no vaccines. There was nothing to help. There was no intervention. You just had to hope that you were strong enough, or your body, or the strain that you got was not going to be that dreadful. So, yeah, it was very lonely. But as I say, we all got through it because I didn't want to expose myself to anything, being here
Right.
alone. And but we got through it. I went back and rewrote some pages and came to the rest of it in a better frame of mind. And I look back on it now and I say, well, riders on the storm. That's all we are and can ever hope to be, isn't it? Just riders on the storm. We had our own storm. The whole world did. And those of us that got through it okay are blessed. And, you know, I hope
Absolutely.
I never forget that.
Yeah. Riders on the storm, indeed. The year of the locust, you might think it's 2024, but it's actually the year of the locust. The book comes out everywhere on February the 6th. Is that right, Terry?
Yes, yes, that's right.
And go visit your local bookstore. Be there on pub day to pick up your copy. We'll put a link in the show notes where you can grab it from Amazon. Also, you can pre-order it now. It'll be available in just a couple of weeks. This is a thrill ride of a book, and as you can see, I believe it's 700 and some pages. Terry, you have about 790 pages or so, and
Yeah.
if this book lasts you a weekend, I will be surprised. It is it's a
Thank you.
it's a journey that you will take and want to retake from time to time. I absolutely love the book. Terry, I could sit and listen to you talk all day long. This has been
Oh,
so
thank
much
you.
fun chatting. We're going to send everyone to pick up the book. Thank you so much for taking time to come on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me, and it's been a great conversation. I was told before I came on what a great interviewer you are by somebody who I respect, and it's been really enjoyable. And we managed to avoid the question of, did you ever date Nicole Kidman? Do you think Mel Gibson has problems? And all of that stuff that, you know, is a
We'll
bit
save
unfair.
those for a follow up conversation.
Well, you bet.
Y-
So thank you very, very much. And thank you to all the listeners for, if they're still awake, thank you. If they fell asleep, well, I did my job.
There you go. Thank you, Terry.
Thanks, Hank. Thanks. We'll catch each other